I said, "Step away from my door." I snapped, my voice sharp as broken glass, as Sloane Marlowe turned with a stolen key halfway to my lock. Her perfectly composed smile cracked the moment she saw I wasn't bluffing and that the camera above the door was recording. What she didn't know was that this cabin held more than memories. It held the power to unravel everything she'd built. I swear, if she touched my doorknob again, I wasn't going to be responsible for what happened next. My voice shook with a mixture of rage and disbelief as I stepped onto the front porch, startling the group of strangers standing there as if they were about to start a tour. Sloane Marlowe's perfectly groomed face twisted, caught mid-motion with a key in hand, my keyhole on my cabin door. "Mr. Reeves," she said with a frozen smile, "you startled us." Us. There were 5 people on my porch, none of whom I recognized, all dressed like they were scouting real estate. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "This is private property. Routine fire safety walkthrough," she said smoothly, tucking the keys back into her purse like I hadn't just caught her red-handed. "Per Silver Pine Shores HOA protocol. Just making sure everything's up to code." "I don't recall signing anything that gives you access to my home," I snapped. "And I definitely didn't invite strangers over." One of the women glanced at the others and said quietly, "Maybe we should go." "Yes," I said firmly. "That would be a good idea." I didn't move until every last one of them had stepped off my deck and climbed into their luxury SUVs, leaving behind a thick silence and a stomach full of suspicion. It had been 3 quiet weeks since I moved into my late Uncle Warren's cedar cabin on the edge of Silver Pine Lake, Minnesota. I'd inherited the place after his unexpected passing, a home built with his own hands back in the 60s, nestled in pine trees and sitting on a slice of pristine lakefront that most people would kill to own. I came out here for peace, for healing. After losing my wife 2 years ago, I was tired of noise, tired of traffic, tired of city politics and fake friendships. The cabin had always felt like sanctuary when I was a boy, but now it felt like a pawn in someone else's game. The first person to greet me when I arrived in Silver Pine Shores was Sloane Marlowe. 61 years old, president of the HOA for over a decade, and with a demeanor like sweet tea that had turned sour. She arrived at my door that first week with a basket of homemade scones and a practiced smile. "Welcome back to the lake," she said warmly. "Your uncle was a pillar of this community. We're all so happy to see his legacy stay in the family." At the time, I thanked her and tried to believe her kindness was genuine. The second visit came a few days later. No basket this time, no scones. Just Sloane wearing designer sunglasses and sitting herself down in one of the rocking chairs on my porch like she owned the place. "You know," she said, glancing out at the dock, "your uncle used to let the Elite Waters Club host some of their summer gatherings here. Just once or twice a season. Nothing intrusive. Just neighbors enjoying the lake." I raised an eyebrow. "He never mentioned that to me." Well, she chuckled. "Warren was a generous man." "I'm sure you'll want to keep that spirit alive." "I'm not comfortable lending out my home," I said. "I work remotely and value my privacy." The smile froze on her face like lake ice. "Of course," she said coolly. "We'll revisit it later." I started noticing the sideways glances at the general store after that. Whispering. People who used to nod now stared too long or avoided eye contact entirely. The friendly greetings tapered off. Even the mailman seemed suddenly stiff. I chalked it up to small-town dynamics until the porch incident, and then it all made sense. That night, I called my neighbor, Victor Ames. We hadn't talked much beyond a few polite waves, but I knew he'd lived here a while and didn't seem the type to cozy up to Sloane's circle. He listened without interrupting. "You're not the first," he said finally. "That woman has been trying to get her hands on the lakefront properties ever since her husband died. Yours is one of the last independent parcels not under HOA control." "Wait, I'm not even in the HOA," I asked. "Not legally," Victor said. "Your uncle refused to sign the incorporation papers when the HOA was formed. She's been pissed about it ever since." The next day, I found a notice in my mailbox: emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance. 7:00 p.m. tomorrow. No explanation, no details. Just a bold stamp with the HOA's emblem and Sloane's signature underneath. The Silver Pine Shores Community Center was decked out like a lodge trying to be a country club. Faux leather chairs, marble-look floors, a chandelier that didn't belong anywhere near pine paneling. As I walked in, every conversation stopped. Sloane stood at the front with her usual polished gavel in hand. She called the meeting to order and launched into her monologue about protecting the integrity of the lakefront and clarifying boundary adjustments. Then she unveiled the map, a giant laminated map of Silver Pine Lake with fresh red lines drawn in marker. My cabin, my uncle's cabin, was now firmly planted within the HOA boundary. As you can see, she said, pointer in hand, due to updated records, the Reeves property now falls under HOA jurisdiction. We're pleased to welcome Mr. Reeves as an official community member. I stood up slowly. That's a lie. Murmurs rippled through the room. I have the original deed. My property has never been part of the HOA. My uncle never agreed to this. Sloane's smile never wavered. Those records are outdated. This is the new map. Drawn with a Sharpie, I said dryly. That got a few chuckles from the back row, quickly silenced by Sloane's glare. She moved on quickly. As per community values, all lakefront property owners will now contribute a minimum of 2 weekends per summer for shared access use by the Elite Waters Club. I blinked. You're forcing people to let strangers use their private homes? Community participation is a cornerstone of Silver Pine, she said sweetly, and your uncle understood that. I pulled out the envelope I'd brought containing copies of the deed and boundary survey signed and notarized back in the 1970s. I handed them to the HOA secretary. Legally recorded, county approved. My property is not part of this HOA. There was a tense silence. Then Sloane said, we'll take that under advisement. Now let's move to a vote. It wasn't a vote, it was a show. Every head nodder and country club loyalist in the front row raised their hands. Some folks in the back hesitated. One older woman lowered her hand halfway up when Sloane locked eyes with her. The motion passed 22-6. It felt like a noose tightening. I walked out without another word. When I got home, there was an envelope tucked into the crack of my front door. No return address. Inside was a single note handwritten in careful script. Your cabin was never part of the HOA. I can prove it. Meet me tomorrow at the Lakeside Diner. 9 a.m. A friend. I stared out at the lake that night, the surface calm as glass, the dock creaking softly with the breeze. Somewhere under that stillness, the water churned. So did the truth. And whatever this battle was, it wasn't just about lake parties or neighborhood bylaws anymore. This was war, and I wasn't backing down. The note sat heavy in my palm as if it weighed more than a scrap of paper ever should. I must have read it 20 times by the time the sun crept over the eastern pines, casting gold over Silver Pine Lake. Your cabin was never part of the HOA. I can prove it. Meet me tomorrow at the Lakeside Diner. 9 a.m. A friend. I didn't know if it was a trap or a lifeline, but after what I'd witnessed at the HOA meeting, the rigged vote, the redrawn boundary lines, the robotic hands lifted in favor of forcing me into Sloane's little empire, I had no choice but to follow the lead. So I was at the Lakeside Diner at 8:45, seated in a cracked leather booth by the window with a coffee I wasn't drinking and my back to the wall. At 9:01, a woman slid into the seat across from me like she'd done it 100 times. She wore a dark coat, sunglasses, and the kind of quiet confidence that told me she didn't care if people stared. Talia Griffin, she said. Former board member. I resigned last year. Couldn't stomach what Sloane was doing anymore. She slid a manila folder across the table. I opened it to find satellite images, surveyor reports, and 2 versions of the same map, one dated 1979 with the HOA boundaries outlined in black, and another from this year where those same lines had mysteriously drifted to swallow my property whole. These are official, I asked. Pulled from the county registry before Sloane had her cousin start submitting amended filings. Talia said, her voice cold. She's been slowly redrawing the map for years, pushing the HOA boundary out inch by inch like a snake curling around the lake. Your cabin sits on a strategic piece of shoreline. It's the keystone to a development project she's been working on in secret, the Silver Pine Haven Resort. I didn't respond immediately, just stared out at the calm lake I thought was a haven, not a battleground. Talia continued. She's got investors lined up. Quiet meetings? Elite Waters Club is just the front. What she really wants is to sell the lake. Before I could ask what she meant, another figure joined us. Victor Ames, my neighbor from 3 cabins down. He looked like he'd stepped out of a John Grisham novel, tall and tired, and dressed like a man who'd argued in courtrooms where no one smiled. Hope you don't mind me dropping in, he said. Talia looped me in. I used to practice real estate law before I retired. He slid a legal pad onto the table and pointed to a section in the old deed I'd shown at the HOA meeting. This is the easement clause, he said. See that your uncle negotiated environmental drainage control rights in 1972. This cabin, your property, controls the water flow to the entire western basin of Silver Pine Lake. I blinked. Wait, you're saying my cabin doesn't just sit on the lake? It controls it. Victor nodded, which makes it a regulatory bottleneck. That drainage system protects against erosion, flooding, and downstream contamination. The county gave your uncle sole stewardship of it under environmental preservation laws. It's ironclad. Any development within a mile of that drainage outlet needs the owner's consent. That's you. I leaned back slowly, breath caught somewhere between relief and horror. Sloan hadn't just wanted my porch. She wanted the controls. She wanted the valve to the lake, and I was the only thing standing between her and the resort of her dreams. Why now, I asked. Because she's running out of time, Talia said. She's already promised your land to her investors. She's overcommitted and under pressure. That's why she's moving so aggressively. Victor added, she's using the HOA as a weapon. Her cousin's firm is preparing to send you a cease and desist. They'll claim you violated community standards, everything from tree trimming to dock repairs. It's not legal, but it's enough to tie you up in paperwork and bleed you dry. That prediction proved accurate the next morning when I opened my mailbox to find a thick envelope from Marlowe, Gibson & Clark, LLP, signed by a partner I'd never met, one who I later found out happened to be Sloan's cousin. The letter accused me of unauthorized dock work, improper shoreline maintenance, and a failure to register my property with the HOA. It listed 10 violations and a bill for $4,000 in corrective fees. Victor reviewed it with a lawyer's eye. 90% of this is intimidation theater, he said. But the 10% that sticks will cost you time and legal fees. That's the game. Death by paperwork. Over the next week, the pressure campaign escalated. A bright red notice of infraction sign appeared staked in my front yard. The town police chief, a man named Hal Fenner, with a suspiciously warm friendship with Sloan, paid me a courtesy call to remind me that unfriendly residents don't last long in tight-knit communities. My trash pickup stopped. My packages were rerouted. A local contractor I'd hired to repair some roof shingles mysteriously canceled after getting a call from someone on the board. It wasn't just a land grab, it was psychological warfare. I felt it most late at night alone on the dock with nothing but the sound of frogs and distant water lapping against the cedar. I thought about selling. I thought about leaving. But every time I did, I remembered the old photo above the fireplace, Uncle Warren and his waiters hauling driftwood out of the water with a smile on his face. That man didn't build a sanctuary just to hand it over to a smiling tyrant. We need to fight back, I told Victor and Talia. But we can't just fight fire with fire. We need a plan that burns her from the inside out. What are you thinking, Talia asked. I glanced toward the cabin. We make her think I'm giving up, that I'm selling, that she's won. Victor's eyes narrowed. We bait her. Exactly, I said. We give her a reason to show her cards, and we catch everything on camera. You'll need legal cover, Victor said, and someone on the inside. That's when Talia mentioned Louisa, Sloan's daughter-in-law, she said. Married to her son Trevor, she's sharp, and I think she's had enough. 2 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. I believe you. Let me know how I can help. Louisa, we met in the back booth of the Lakeside Diner, just like before. She looked nervous but resolute. She's been promising your property to people who write six-figure checks, Louisa said. She has a presentation planned next weekend, an investor retreat. She's calling it a community event. Says you've agreed to vacate the cabin for 48 hours for inspection. I stared at her. I never said anything close to that. Louisa nodded. Exactly. But she thinks she's broken you. She's telling everyone it's a done deal. I sat back and exhaled. Then let her believe it. Let her set the whole thing up. Let her decorate, pitch, tour the cabin like she owns it. And while she's doing it, I'll have cameras in every room. We'll need backup, Victor said. Someone from the county, a neutral party. I'll talk to my Aunt Evelyn, I said. She's not just a former county clerk. She kept records that Sloan thought had been destroyed. Perfect, Talia said. Let's give her enough rope to hang herself. The trap was set. I posted a vague status on my Facebook. Sometimes the fight's just not worth it. I mentioned big changes ahead and left the rest to rumor. Within hours, the whispers started. Sloan had won. Malcolm Reeves was selling out. But what she didn't know was that every celebratory step she took, every caterer she booked, every investor she welcomed, every map she unveiled, was being documented in full. Because sometimes the best way to win a war isn't to strike first. It's to let your enemy think they already won. Saturday morning arrived crisp and golden with the lake so still it looked like glass. From the hill above Silver Pine Lake, I watched the first wave of luxury SUVs snake their way toward my cabin, kicking up little clouds of gravel dust as they pulled into the driveway I had spent weeks defending. I stood beside Victor Ames' binoculars in one hand, the emergency injunction sealed in an envelope under my arm. Behind us, Talia Griffin monitored the feed from the hidden cameras we had installed in every room of the cabin. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for Sloan Marlowe to spring it. She arrived fashionably late in a cream-colored pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, stepping out of her black Escalade like she was the guest of honor at her own coronation. Her voice carried through the pines as she greeted her guests, a curated collection of developers, investors, and elite Waters Club insiders. "We're so excited to finally showcase this unique opportunity," she said, sweeping her arm toward the cabin. "This jewel of Silver Pine Lake is the final piece in our long-term vision for the Silver Pine Haven Resort." I could see the way she moved through the crowd, confident, rehearsed, charming, in the way only someone who knew they'd already won could be. But the moment she stepped through my front door, everything began to change. On the screen inside Victor's RV, we watched as she led the group into the living room and gestured toward a set of mounted lakefront renderings. "As you can see," she said, "once we complete acquisition of this parcel, the entire western shoreline becomes available for development. We plan to install a private marina here and luxury cottages along the edge." One man, tan slick, clearly moneyed, asked, "What about the environmental regulations?" Sloan laughed. "This property technically isn't part of the HOA, but that's a paperwork issue. The current owner doesn't understand the legal gray areas he's in. Once we establish joint community use under HOA oversight, we'll file for redevelopment exemptions." On another feed, we caught her in the kitchen with a smaller group pouring champagne and whispering, "We've already filed noise complaints and safety violations. He's overwhelmed. He won't last much longer." She had no idea every word was being recorded. Meanwhile, Jessica, Talia's friend, was snapping license plates out by the road. And Louisa, Sloan's daughter-in-law, was inside too, playing her part perfectly, nodding in agreement and guiding guests toward the presentation while slipping us quiet updates via text. At 1:42 p.m., Sloan stood in front of the assembled crowd in my great room and delivered her pitch. "This is more than property. It's legacy repositioning. Once we convert this into our anchor property, Silver Pine Haven will be unmatched in lakeside luxury. Our projected returns exceed 300% in 5 years." The room applauded. That was our cue. I climbed back into my truck and drove slowly down the hill, Victor beside me, the county attorney in the back seat, along with Evelyn, my aunt, and the former clerk whose memory and files had cracked this case wide open. As I pulled into my own driveway, several guests stepped aside, confused. I parked in the same spot Sloan had claimed for herself. When I got out, her face froze mid-sentence. "Malcolm," she said, stepping forward, the smile already back on, "we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Clearly," I said. "Seems like the party started without me." Behind me, the county attorney stepped up and handed her the injunction. "Miss Marlowe," he said formally, "this property is protected under a long-standing environmental easement. All activities pertaining to development, inspection, or forced entry are hereby suspended under Minnesota state law, pending formal review. This order also prohibits the hosting of any unauthorized gatherings or marketing events on the premises." Sloan tried to laugh it off. "This must be some kind of mix-up. We're just conducting a harmless community walkthrough. You misrepresented yourself and this property to outside investors," I said, my voice calm. "And every single word of it is on video." The guests were starting to whisper now, murmuring to each other as they looked around uneasily. One of them pulled out a phone and began checking messages. Another man stepped away from the group, entirely heading for his car. "You have no right to embarrass me in front of my colleagues," Sloan hissed, stepping closer. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Stopped you," I said simply, "from turning a protected lake into a private playground for millionaires." Behind me, Talia arrived with a portable speaker and a USB drive. "Play it," I said. Within seconds, Sloane's voice echoed through her carefully staged investor retreat. The current owner doesn't understand the legal gray areas he's in. Once we complete acquisition of this parcel, he's overwhelmed. He won't last much longer. The audio played on. Investors stood frozen, expressions shifting from confusion to discomfort to outright disgust. Louisa stepped forward, no longer pretending. This isn't the first time, she said. She's been doing this for years, faking violations, intimidating neighbors, lying about HOA authority. I stayed silent too long. Sloane turned to her with fury. You ungrateful little, enough, the county attorney cut in. This event is over. You and your guests need to leave immediately. Sloane looked around for allies and found none. Even the HOA treasurer, who had arrived late and watched quietly from the edge of the lawn, now took a step back, distancing herself physically and politically. Chief Hal Fenner pulled into the driveway 10 minutes later and approached with the same tired arrogance he always wore. What's going on here, he asked. I've had 3 noise complaints and a report of unauthorized gathering, and I've got audio proof of your buddy illegally trespassing, I replied, holding up a flash drive. The county attorney added, an ethics complaint will be filed with the state chief. We suggest you cooperate. Hal's bravado shriveled. He nodded curtly and turned away. Sloane stood, rooted fury written across her face. This isn't over, she said. I'll sue. I'll drag you through every court in the state. Do it, I said. But just know every call you've made, every document you've forged, every dollar you've promised, it's all unraveling now. That evening, the fallout spread like wildfire. The HOA board called an emergency session. At the meeting this time, led by Victor as interim chair, multiple homeowners testified about the pressure, the bullying, the doctored fines. Even those who had once supported Sloane turned on her. She was officially removed by a nearly unanimous vote. Her cousin's law firm came under immediate review by the state bar. The Elite Waters Club quietly severed ties with her, pulling funding from any planned events. And the Silver Pine Haven project, dead on arrival. I stood at the back of the meeting hall, arms crossed, watching the community reclaim its voice. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in weeks now nodded, shook my hand, thanked me. A few even apologized. 2 days later, we filed for nonprofit status under the newly formed Silver Pine Preservation Council, dedicated to maintaining the lake's natural ecosystem and protecting cabin owner rights. Jessica volunteered to run communications. Victor took legal affairs. And Louisa, finally free of her mother-in-law's shadow, agreed to represent community outreach. A week passed, then another. Life around the lake settled into something quieter, more honest. The birds came back. So did the trust. One night I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single postcard. On the front, a photo of Silver Pine Lake at sunset. On the back, 7 words in blocky handwritten print. You won the battle but not the war. No signature, no threat. Just a shadow from the past. I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a fish and poured myself a glass of whiskey. Outside, the dock creaked beneath the feet of new friends. A barbecue sizzled on the grill. Fireflies blinked across the surface of the lake. I raised my glass toward the photograph of my uncle hanging above the hearth. Still standing, Warren, I said quietly, and not going anywhere. The story of Malcolm Reeves isn't just about property lines or HOA politics. It's about standing your ground when everything around you is designed to push you out. It's a powerful reminder that the truth, even when buried under years of manipulation and intimidation, still has the strength to rise when someone has the courage to fight for it. One of the biggest lessons we can take from this story is that power unchecked becomes dangerous, especially when cloaked in politeness, prestige, or policy. Sloane Marlowe didn't just abuse her title as HOA president, she weaponized it. And too many people for too long stayed quiet out of fear or fatigue. But all it took was one person, Malcolm, armed with evidence, conviction, and a little help from brave allies to bring the truth into the light. This story also teaches us the importance of documentation and legacy. Malcolm's ability to stand firm was rooted in the legal groundwork his uncle had laid decades ago. It's a reminder that what we build, protect, and preserve today can empower future generations. Whether it's a cabin, a tradition, or a value, we should never underestimate the impact of our stewardship. And perhaps most importantly, this story is about community accountability. Once neighbors found the courage to speak up, the tide shifted. People like Talia Victor and Louisa played crucial roles not by making loud declarations, but by taking brave steps in the right direction. It shows that change doesn't start with a crowd. It starts with a conscience. To all of you listening, whether you're facing a situation that feels unjust or watching someone else go through one, I encourage you, don't stay silent. Stand up, speak out, and seek the truth even if it's uncomfortable. Because when good people come together, bullies lose their power. Thank you so much for spending your time with US Daily Story. Your support means the world to us, especially as we shine a light on the everyday battles that often go unseen. These stories reflect real struggles, real courage, and real justice, and we share them not just to entertain, but to inspire. If Malcolm's story moved you, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, or sharing this video with someone who might need a little courage today. You never know whose life you might touch by spreading a story that matters. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and never underestimate the power of one voice.